So what do I need to do here?
Just call your meeting to order.
Let's call the Town of Pierson Charter Review Committee to order for Thursday, May the 15th at 5:30. Ryan, you need a roll call?
Yep. Chairman Paul Brewer.
Here.
Vice Chairman Rick Davis.
Here.
Committeewoman Sue Elliott.
Here.
Committeeman Jeremy Stedman.
Here.
Committeewoman Deanna Bennett.
Here.
And I'm present.
Okay. I guess we need to do the Pledge of Allegiance and a roll. And
We do have a flag. You want the invocation first or the flag?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to get together to discuss the business of this town of Pierson. We ask you to bless our efforts here and bless all those in attendance. In the name of your Son, our Father, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, no. No. You came in after I explained to them, they explained we are one.
Yes, I guess that's the national anthem. So this is what you all did?
This is grammatical errors or
Yeah,
things
just
that
minor.
probably minor, like chaining and sharing and things like that that I had found. And
There's 2 pages that I could find had something on it.
Everything
4
else.
only had one thing and 2 had several.
And what is this attached? Because I didn't. Is this one of the ones
That
we
is
got
the
sent?
St. Petersburg example.
We got more than one example, didn't we, or not?
3.
3.
Got Lake Helen, Oak Hill, and St. Pete.
And do we have the copies of Lake Helen? Or no?
They was in the
They were in an email.
Yeah, they were in the
email,
email.
not
I
I
haven't
printed
printed
them
them
out.
out.
No, I printed mine out.
So why did we print this one over
Well, let's
the
go ahead
other?
and do the minutes.
Yeah, so I guess we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
So I guess we've got the approved by Jeremy Stedman and second by
Give Sue credit.
Sue Elliott. We need to vote on this?
Yeah.
Just all, you don't have to do a roll call. You can just say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
I listened to the minutes.
I'm very rusty at this, y'all. You just have to bear with me. Trust me.
Doing a fine job.
We're with
So number 5, new business.
All right, so now we got new business. So for discussion, I guess, any edits or questions?
Okay, now everybody can go wild.
Yeah, now we can go.
So Deanna, the reason I only printed the one is because that was the only one that Scott actually sent as an example of a strong mayor form of government. I think the other 2 Yvonne had just randomly downloaded and sent to you as examples. Scott didn't really tell me what form of government they were, so I just didn't want to present it to you without knowing.
Okay. Because I think, I was just curious, because this is Lake Helen's, this one, right? That's kind of our size
Yeah.
town, and
I
maybe
think
it might
Lake
be
Helen-
structured on more like
I'm
that.
pretty sure Lake Helen is a, city,
And a city manager.
city administrator type of government. They have a city manager down there. They also have a mayor and council, but they have an administrator that runs their day-to-day.
They've been in the paper too lately.
Yeah, they have. One of their council people does not care for one of the city managers.
Right.
And St. Pete doesn't have a city manager?
Well, they're a strong mayor form of government, so that's where the mayor is on the board, but he is also an administrative, in other words, he's working in the office. So he kind of is acting as
City manager.
the city manager, right? He's probably got a clerk that works under him and whatnot, but in that instance, usually the mayor is making those decisions. We talked a little bit about, Mark Corrett was here today, our town planner. And I don't know if any of you guys have heard the stuff that Willaca is going through right now. But Willaca has a strong mayor form of government, technically. I mean, they're a smaller town, and they have a council. But Mark said that 4 of the council people up there, they're not like the council people in Pierson. They don't come in every day, ask what's going on, get updates from the staff. They only come to council meetings. So if they don't hear it at a council meeting, they don't know what's going on. So what happened up there is their mayor, because it was a strong mayor sort of government, was like, for instance, they haven't done a state audit in 4 years of their finances. And they said that he was getting, requests in the mail and whatnot, and he was just wadding them up and throwing them in the trash. And the council knew nothing about it because he didn't bring it to the meeting and tell anybody, hey, we're getting all these requests. So it's gone 4 years. Well, now, about a month or 2 months ago, their town clerk quit, and then last week their deputy clerk quit. So now the new mayor, because the old mayor left or was voted out or whatever, and so now the new mayor and their utility clerk are trying to figure out how to run the office in Willaca. So there are dangers to giving one person too much, because if you get a bad one, so it's just something to keep in mind as you move forward.
I picked up on what you brought up at the last meeting. We don't really fit any one of the.
No.
We're
But
kind of
you know
unique.
what? It's been working pretty well.
We're kind of unique.
I think I like our unique form.
Well, I have to agree. And Mr. Simpson indicated, well, really, I mean, once you look at it, the first 4 sections of the charter, you really don't have to make any changes other than what you have used. Then you get down to, again, that goes through page 2, all the way down to municipal powers, or the municipal organization of the officers. What I'm getting at is the first 2.5 pages are just standard stuff.
Yeah.
Then, and even Scott recommended we do something about section 1 of the municipal organization and officers when it comes to the mayor as judge and jury, so to speak. He said probably not even lawful. So, what I'm getting at there is, we mentioned last time the possibility of introducing a new charter. I personally would rather strike from this charter than introduce a new charter, because there's not a whole lot to strike here.
I concur.
You go through now, if we're concerned about the powers of the mayor, we can, you could go council, mayor, clerk, with clerk running the day-to-day with supervisory authority, I'll call it, from the mayor, and then the council with a final decision on it if there's any major issues on day-to-day activities. Because that's basically, we're a simple system here. And I hate to change too much of it, because what we've got has worked for years and years, basically.
We brought it from something that was that thick down to something that we can work.
Mm-hmm.
And most everything is enumerated in the ordinances. So we just need a skeleton.
Yeah, and, because I went and read chapter 165 and 166 in Florida statutes, and basically it says, you set up the charter anyway, you do whatever you want, and the council can lay out anything that, you read these others, and they've got all of this stuff outlined as to,
And the more
well,
you
see,
have, the less freedom that the
the more
council has.
constricted. Yeah.
exactly. And so the way this is set up, short of needing to eliminate some things, is about as simple as you can get, and it still leaves the council in authority. Final authority, I'll say.
No one person can run away with anything.
No.
There is protection.
You've got a clerk that, let's just say the clerk was making day-to-day decisions under the the authority of the mayor. You know, now, and I'll have to throw in the council, because, for example, if one of the guys came in and said, well, we've got a leak over on Second Avenue, what do we do? I mean, yeah, the clerk can easily say, go fix it. But if he says, I don't want to fix it, then he has to go upstairs, I guess. But no, all I'm confusing the issue really is, we've got a simple system that we can pinpoint where that chain of command is, call it that. And to me, that's the biggest issue we have to settle in this charter. Because in section 1 under the mayor, it's saying all kinds of things that, if I may, is second sentence, he or she, that could easily say the council should have power. But again, according to Scott, this whole paragraph could be taken out, but we still are going to need somebody to administer oaths, which is for 5 lines down. And, that could easily be done by the clerk. And that type of authorities, or certain authorities, can be given to clerk that they're definitely not going to allow the clerk to run rampant. But go back to square one. If we can go step by step on every line in this thing and decide to delete it or keep it, I don't want to jump too far ahead, and I apologize for that. But like I said, after reading through it, and especially reading 165 and 166, you can go all the way down to, well, again, we're on Article 3 without having to touch a thing except what Max has corrected in the grammar and tense. So,
Now, how about on the second, page 2 at the top? When I read that, I thought there were a lot of things that didn't seem like it's really the way it happens. So I don't know. All officers shall assume the duties of the respective offices on the first Monday in October next following their election. Is that even accurate?
No.
yeah, well, see,
Yeah.
that's
That's
you-
part
those are
of
the
your
corrections
typo.
that Max is going to make.
Yeah,
in
there's
there.
a-
I thought
Yeah,
you said
really-
they were just like
No.
typo
No,
corrections.
there are things that,
Yeah.
Okay.
Typos and tense
And
is
so that
basically.
actually does contradict the next section where they combine the mayor with the council chair seat, because that one does say that they'll take their oath and they'll, take their seat on the council the first meeting after the election in November, which is how it should read. So the October one will have to come out, that's old language. And if I may, I'll give,
Okay.
to Rick's point, I'll give you another example. So that under the mayor, section 2, where it says additional powers, the mayor shall have the power to suspend any officer or employee of the town for misconduct in office, neglect of duty, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem with this is we found out that this directly contradicts the town of Pierson's personnel handbook. And the attorney told us, well, your handbook that you had your employees sign and acknowledge receiving tells you how, these types of things work. But if anyone ever pushed the issue, you'd have to defer to the charter, because that's
that
your charter.
takes precedence.
So in that situation, what you probably want to do is, instead of having it spelled out in your charter, like you were saying, a lot of things are spelled out in ordinances. So here you would say the town council shall establish an employee handbook that may be updated from time to time, that would outline the procedures for. So in other words, your charter would refer you to some source that was more easily updated and edited. Just like, or like a purchasing ordinance, for example. Instead of specifying in your charter, the mayor is allowed to make a purchase of this amount with no authorization, or the town clerk is allowed, instead of putting it there, you would say, refer to purchasing ordinance, and then we could update those as a council as we see fit, rather than having to go to the ballot, change it in the charter. Because those things are more fluid, I think, over time. So that might be a consideration, as you go forward.
The original one was so restrictive. I mean, it was down to how many inches you could do this and how many things. It was ridiculous. You couldn't move. So this way, we don't have to take everything on a ballot. And I kind of agree so far what you've been saying about why would we reinvent the wheel when we've got a fairly good one to start with? These other places, when they read ours, they're probably going to say, hey, this is the way we need to go. Trim it down, make it simple.
Well, I'm all for trimming it down. We already know section 1, something's got to be under the mayor, something has to be done. And of course, you really answered the question on section 2 with if there's an issue with the employee, that it goes to the charter anyway, but by adding, if necessary, adding that handbook statement, at least they'll know that's available and it may be updated from time to
Do
time.
you have a copy of that employee handbook, Ryan, so we can see how that's worded in there?
I do, but I can go bring you one if you want me to bring you one. Or I can bring you one in the next meeting.
That's fine.
Is there a Article 1 entitled Article 1? Yeah, Article 2, 3, 4.
In the charter.
Yeah.
And see, that's one thing I was making notes to myself when we first got this, that we didn't have an Article 1 there. And I guess, I don't know if that would come over the very first statement you make or not.
Yeah.
You got section 1 on the Pierson Town Charter. Would that be Article 1, section 1?
Right.
I wanted to see how it's worded in the old charter.
I was confused myself when I was reading these,
So
the original stuff.
Article 1 is called General Provisions. And it probably just didn't get moved over when they digitized it.
Okay, so that actually is already
I
in
think
place.
it's that way. It has general provisions on the internet version. It may, or else it was the one I was reading. I've read so many of them the last, I don't know who's on where.
I kind of go along with you about taking stuff out, not putting any more in.
Yeah.
Because we're limiting the council and the mayor by putting stuff in.
Yeah, and when I was reading Oak Hill and Lake Helen, Lake Helen has had issues, and we don't need to open the doors to any argument.
And really truthfully, Article 1, if I go back and look at the original ordinance, it's probably supposed to say that, so that's something I could probably just change. It probably just didn't get transferred to the.
Minor editing.
Yeah. So, but yes, it should be above section 1, establishment of a municipality. It should be Article 1, general provisions.
So things that don't reflect how we're doing it, we're just saying we would try to take that out. Or simple, like section 5, page 4, the salaries of all officers in the town should be fixed by ordinances. I don't think we do that.
Yeah, we don't do that.
We don't do ordinances for salaries, so are we gonna leave that in, or are we gonna try to, because I didn't see any change on the one that y'all did.
Well, this simply says, it's saying the council has that authority to do that. We don't do it, but,
So it's just giving them authority, or is this saying this is how we run the town? Or it's saying if you choose to do it this way, you can, or is
I
it
think the
saying?
procedures get into the detail of running the town. And the charter gives you the overview of how to run the
You
town.
can do it.
So this is just giving permission, but doesn't say you have to do it by
No,
ordinance.
doesn't say.
It's just saying
you shall have the right.
the salaries of all officers of the town shall be fixed by ordinances.
Yeah.
Shall be.
Yeah, I would
Could
say.
be.
It doesn't
I would
say
that
maybe,
No, no,
or
no.
could be if you want,
I
it
would
says
say that
shall be.
wording should probably change.
Wait. Shall be, what wording
The
was
way we
that?
do it for the law enforcement is it's worded shall have the right. In other words, if they want to do it by ordinance, they could, but they don't necessarily have
That's
to.
easy enough.
Yeah, that's because if you look, I think that's the way.
That gives them the option to roll with it.
What would be an advantage of doing it by ordinance? Why would they want to have a right to do it by
Nowadays, it would be
anyway?
very difficult to do that only because most municipal governments do an annual cost of living increase that's built into a budgeting process. So in addition to doing ordinances for your trim, your millage rate, your budget, now you're also doing 2 readings for an ordinance to set everyone's salary. I mean, it would be a lot of paperwork because you have to do it annually.
And what I'm saying is if we don't do that, do we even need to continue to have, I'm just seeing,
Right.
let's have it reflect what we actually do. That's
Right.
all I'm saying in certain instances. And if that's not what we actually do, or it wouldn't be beneficial, then why even have it?
If we
in there?
take that out, do we have to take that to ballot?
Probably.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
And
Just change
again,
the wording there.
well,
It could be, that, can we make it instead of should, it could be?
well, actually, shall have the right. That doesn't say they have to do it.
No.
They have that right if they decided in the future to do it by ordinance.
Mhm.
But then Ryan would come in and say, hey, if you do this, then you're gonna have to make these changes. And then they'll say, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah.
So is that how this all is, Rick? It's like you have the right to do this?
Yes.
Or so any of this is just saying you could do it this way, but you don't necessarily have to.
Yeah, and I would have no problem cutting it out if it didn't create a ballot issue. Because under 165 and 166, you can do anything you want to do, as long as it doesn't conflict with state or
Right.
federal law. So,
Of course, if it doesn't have to go to the ballot, that
It saves
makes
us
our
money.
job a whole lot easier.
easier.
Saves,
Exactly.
also saves the town a lot of money.
That's why I would say, personally, I would say leave it. It doesn't require them to do anything. And hopefully, sane heads would prevail if anyone ever.
And right now with our
decided.
budget as tight as it is and everything, every penny needing to be,
If we had to do a
accounted
COLA, we
for.
could be in trouble.
everything we put on that ballot is, there's quite a bit of money for each thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot. I think it's by line or something.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Now, is that referring to adding or deletion as well?
It's deletions as well.
What about if we change the wording? Just like
It
we
doesn't
talked about
change
this.
the intent.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're clarifying stuff, I mean, if it's significantly changing the meaning of something, then they're gonna strike through it and add new verbiage, so it's probably still gonna have to be a ballot.
See, to me, I read like section 3, the town council shall have the right and authority. You have that right and authority, whereas section 5, I'm reading, you shall. It's
Yeah,
not just
you
a
shall is a
option.
very,
So change
is a
it.
very,
So to me,
specific.
that's not saying you have a right to, it's saying you
Right.
shall do
You
it
shall
this
do it.
way, or you are not following the town charter.
And
which there's-
I would say
Just put
most
shall
things
have
in
the
there,
right to.
You
That's
should
what I
probably
was
say
thinking,
you
yeah.
shall have the right, because.
Yeah.
But then if we're gonna
Leaves it
change it,
flexible.
do we even want it to ever be by ordinance? What would be the advantage?
If we put, just added to have the right to, it doesn't change the intent.
To me, it does, because you either are must
Yeah,
or you shall
Shall.
have a right. So those to me are totally
Shall
different.
to me,
Well,
But I'm
doesn't-
not an attorney, so I
Shall-
don't.
we're looking at, section 3 is referencing only the town marshal and policeman. Section 5 would reference people like Ryan.
Right.
Okay. And I'm assuming your salary is not fixed by ordinance
No.
currently. So section 5 would be one, in my opinion, that probably should be deleted.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
because we
I'd
don't
have
do
to.
that, so can we just take it out? I mean, and to me, it seemed like we should make it reflect.
Well, and that's another situation where our handbook probably outlines how pay and raises and things like that are set. So that would be maybe in conflict with the charter. I mean, you figure since this was written in 1928 or whatever, we
Yeah.
modernized how we handle employees and HR and.
So this is probably in common
If we-
also.
Took that out, would it, then the numbers just slide up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just remember it.
We'll put a question.
But that still adds to the cost of, well, anything we, unless it conflicts in the handbook, anything we do here is going to.
I mean, well, I was gonna say, you're probably gonna realize you're gonna get to a point, and it almost might be easier to present a new draft charter. Like
That's what I-
Scott had talked about. I
Just
mean,
take the things out we don't like.
Well, and
it was
just,
very
yeah,
simplified.
Like you
Make
did.
it more
Yeah, like-
simple even than it is now
Yeah,
and
let's-
reflect what we're actually doing.
you know, for example, you just dropped section 5.
And we did that in the previous, because we start at what now? What is the first thing on the first page? What's section 1 now?
Establishment of new
See,
municipality.
that used to be section 5, so we struck 4 sections above it and renumbered everything last time. So that's how you would do it, you would strike it and then everything would move up.
Is it much of a cost to print that out and have it there for an election?
From what I understood from Scott, you could do a series of meetings leading up to it as a town. You're allowed to inform, but you're not allowed to influence. You're not allowed to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is a good idea or a bad idea. But in other words, you could have a town hall meeting and you could get people to come and you could explain why you were making these changes. And then the town would be able to provide a draft copy of the new charter for people to read. It would be available at the polling location, but it would also be distributed to the residents prior to the election, so they could actually read,
So it'd be like a mass mailing.
basically.
Didn't he also say that it's very hard to pass vote a new charter in Lake Helen's?
Lake Helen's tried, but I would think it would probably depend on the length of the charter. I mean, if you throw a 45-page document at people,
Right.
they're gonna say,
No.
what are they trying to hide in here? But if you throw 3 pages at somebody, but I mean, that's the risk you take. But, is the town gonna want to put, 20 questions on the ballot? It just depends on how much of it you change.
So Rick, on page 1, you're talking about, first couple pages, nothing different, but down at the bottom, is one of the things I marked, like a town marshal or a town treasurer, each of whose term of office shall be 2 years, and who shall be chosen by majority vote of the council. It's saying shall there, shall be, okay, let's see, a town marshal, okay, provided, these are the different officers, right? We don't have any such
We don't.
person that serves as town marshal
We don't
or
have a
treasurer
marshal
for
or
a period of
treasurer.
2 years. So to me, that's like, why are we leaving that in there?
And
That's not
we had talked to Scott about that, getting rid of that.
provided
And
that
also
the
the stuff
town
about the
council.
judges and all that, because we don't have the mayor's not a judge anymore.
Okay, you're on page 3 then.
But now that changes
One.
the intent.
One of the actual charter we have now, the very last part on page 1, right here.
1 is straight up and
The
down.
other one.
2 is a little
Yeah,
curvy.
the other one.
Yeah.
The very you got markings there. And
Yeah,
you wrote some notes beside it because we don't do that. We don't have that. We don't do that. So it's like,
Well, I wasn't at the last meeting, but the town council meeting, but some of what I've heard, was there discussion of dropping the sheriff's department?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, if you've had that discussion, then what do you do?
So maybe,
Well, personally, I don't think we should have that discussion,
We don't either.
but
in fact, he went so far as to say 30 days and he'd pull out.
Well, it can't.
He can't, but
I know they've got a contract, but but a year from now, that could be an issue. And so, but anyway,
Well,
I was.
we were, that they're responsible. I think somewhere in there, I'd have to read it again. I haven't read through it extensively that you do provide for the
may combine
law
any
in
of
some
all.
way and general welfare in that area, but make that kind of.
It says, the very last sentence, provided that the town council may combine any or all of the foregoing offices.
I was saying that town marshal, town treasurer could be one of the officers up above, right?
Yeah.
But we don't, I mean, you all handle the finances, they handle the finances. There's no person to put in for 2 years to do the treasurer and handle the finances. So that would be another thing that I just don't see the point in why that's
I would
having it
have
in
to
there
agree.
when it doesn't reflect what
The
we're
town
doing.
doesn't really have officers anymore. I mean, you've got five council people to include the mayor, and then you've got staff, you've got hired employees. But we don't have elected officers or appointed officers like a treasurer or a police chief or a, you know what I mean, a marshal, a judge. We don't.
Or city manager.
Right.
You do most of the treasury work.
Yeah, but I mean,
So
I'm an employee, I'm not a, you know.
it's designated by,
Not an appointed
he's
officer.
designated by an officer to an employee. So we don't, it's really redundant here.
Just to clarify, the ordinances and all are up to the council to produce. All we're interested in is the charter.
Right, correct.
Well, I would have to agree on that. I mean, of course, we'll have to decide, but I would agree with dropping that particular paragraph because it's unnecessary, hopefully.
And then we got correction at the top of page 2. When they
Yeah.
take their
Max has done that
Thing.
for us.
Then we had the removing of section 5, and then I haven't gotten to look at all. Did y'all get y'all stuff ahead of time, this thing, or y'all just in here earlier? 'Cause
I just brought it in.
He took the original charter and corrected
Yeah, but
it.
I just haven't gotten to compare the two, is all I'm saying, so I can't really tell.
Max brought this with him today.
Right, okay, so I didn't know if y'all had seen it ahead.
It's just
I
the
haven't really
word government or
compared them.
governance, and it's just a matter of semantics there. It's not changing anything. And the only thing we changed is we don't chain the
Right.
council. He chairs the council. And not government, and we can use the cars that comes out with governance rather than government.
But I think where you were saying, Rick, a lot of the time was under is this where you were saying, starting on page 3? You
Yeah,
had a lot of notes there. Yeah.
section 1.
Right.
I mean,
'Cause that does-
let's assume, I'm just talking dropping stuff now and then taking that out of the current charter and presenting a new charter, okay? To save the town money. Under section 1, yeah, I'm all for dropping the judge and jury type thing for the mayor. It did have the duty of administering oaths under the mayor. I don't recall in reading 165, 166, if that was the thing.
Which one are you on, article?
This is section 1, article 3, page 3. The vast majority of that paragraph could easily be dropped.
Mhm.
Okay. As for administering oath or determining the guilt or innocence of the accused on ordinances. Now,
Thank you.
or ordinances, criminal offenses or the civil, that's what I'm getting at. If I use too much water, okay, if we had an ordinance that said you can only use so much water and I use too much water, I'm not going to jail for it. But the council's somebody within city government has to say, well, Rick, this is what you do. And that may already, I'll say de facto, that type of stuff may already be covered. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if we're not in conflict with the state anyway, with saying this stuff anyway.
We don't
So-
really have a court.
Right. We don't.
This reminds me of the old Georgia towns where the nephew was the policeman.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's not what
They
we're
take you
doing.
into the back room and say, guilty.
Because we're saying that he can pardon and release persons
No.
convicted by him or her and all
And
that. I
most
mean,
of-
that's why I'm just like, this doesn't reflect anything what we're doing.
I guess what I'm really trying to say in this is, do we need to have someone designated to administer oaths? And do we need to have someone designated to handle violations of our town codes, whatever they may be?
Well, so the interesting thing is the way our land development regulations are written now is that most ordinances, if there's a code violation, are handled by the DRA, the Developmental Regulations Administrator, which at this current time is Yvonne. So already that's in conflict with that, because the mayor would not be making those decisions that would go to Yvonne. And one of the interesting things that we learned about that is that the mayor really isn't allowed to do that anyway, because when this was written, the mayor was not a council.
Right.
But now he is, and he has voting power. So you can't vote for an ordinance and then police that ordinance,
Right.
because now you're being an executive and judicial, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
All
there's a
the more-
separation of powers there.
All the more reason to drop that entire paragraph. And based on what you just said, with the DRA or whatever that's called, the only thing I still come to is administering of oaths.
And who takes an oath?
Well, new council people
Do
take
they
an
take
oath.
an oath? Or do
And-
they just
and
get
that's-
sworn in?
But-
Or they
but-
take-
but
They get sworn
Yvonne-
in, do they take an oath?
Clerk, the
Well-
clerk did the,
Yvonne administered it.
yeah.
Right,
So
correct.
apparently that's
That's the
something
duty.
we're doing anyway.
We have that covered.
So
You don't need
that
any
whole
of it.
paragraph could go down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just X that whole thing
Drop
out.
section 1.
yeah, the whole thing.
See, I think the thing that has made a lot of that obsolete is the fact that the mayor is no longer separate from the council chair. And
That's
so
where it
now
all
he's
got
going to be
muddy.
limited by what the council
Well,
is.
it's made it like all the other cities in the,
Yeah,
in the
well,
whole
why not?
state, you know? We
Country.
were the oddity back in the day where you had a mayor that had no
He
voting
was
power.
ceremonial,
He was
essentially.
ceremonial only.
Yeah.
That was
Baby
the odd
kisser.
thing out.
Right.
So now that we have a mayor,
So
that's more typical.
administering oaths is kind of almost like a fluff kind of job. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't really.
You got to kiss the babies and the
Right,
old
shake
ladies
hands
and
yeah,
go to the meetings.
right. Because a lot of the mayors.
Well, we're just
powers
chugging
are-
right along.
Hey,
And that takes section 2.
I would love to make the FFA banquet.
Oh, and here's what I was referring to, Rick, I think earlier, we were talking about the police and the, which I'm not for getting rid of sheriffs either, but it says the town council shall have the right and authority to appoint, this is page 4, and employ a town marshal and policeman to prescribe their duties and fix their salaries and ordinance. Now, do we need to put anything in there? Does appoint mean you can contract with, or just mean you have the right to do that?
It says shall
Again,
have
that's
the
a
right.
right,
Shall
right,
have the
shall
right.
have the right, but it doesn't mean you have to do
No,
that.
you
So
do
we
not
have,
have
so
to.
that's probably okay. I knew it was
Yeah.
just in there somewhere where about that.
So we can contract with the sheriff,
Mhm.
or we can do,
Or we could hire our own.
Or
I think
hire
that
our
leaves it open for you being able to hire your own.
And should worse come to worse, we could hire somebody.
Is Barney Fife here?
That's what.
Let's get Andy, please, not Barney.
we
And-
did have, didn't we used to have one.
Harold.
George
Harold
Leary was
Carlisle.
chief.
Yeah.
And Harold Carlisle and.
He was the constable, I believe.
Yeah, he was constable.
I asked him if he carried a bullet in his shirt pocket.
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, at this point, I see, I think 3 items or sections that we have, at least not officially, but just in talking, seem to want to drop.
On page 1,
That was, yeah, the bottom paragraph, page 1. And then, section 1 on page 3. And then section 5 on page 4.
Now this is strange. On section 4, page 1, we're taking that one section out and then leaving the rest over at the top of page 2.
Where you see it? I'm sorry, I lost you. I think I lost you.
On page 1,
Page 1.
the town marshal and town
Right.
treasurer, we cut that out.
Right.
But then we leave the rest of that in there.
Yeah, I
We
don't-
need to
Yeah,
change
Yeah.
it to
Okay.
Of course,
reflect what we
you got
actually do,
the-
like you have in there.
the Max's corrections, which
yeah,
I think cover that well.
okay. Then you said going to Article 2, municipal powers.
Let me, yeah, and dropping section 1 from that. Okay, that was Article 2, section 1. That's the mayor business.
Article
No.
3.
3. What about Article 2, Section 1,
Yeah.
first and second?
That's, well, it's already allowed within Florida Statute 165.
Okay,
The, because certain things you can do within 5 miles of the town and certain things you can do with 1 mile of the town. I think this is probably just fixing it, in my opinion, in people's minds, that the town can do this, and it's in the charter for that. You don't have to have it there because it's in the state rule, but
but then we go down to Article 3, Section 1, just take that
yeah, just
whole section.
drop that section.
And then with section 2, Ryan says we have contradictions with personnel handbook.
Rewrite
So
that.
We need to get that to be in line with, if we need to have all that in there. That contradictions there.
I think
Maybe so.
before we look at that section, we might need to look at this handbook and just see the wording in it to determine, the wording we may need here or may not
Right,
need.
we don't know
Mhm.
how we need to
Yeah.
put
So
it
we-
here.
So we
need to make it match.
we'll reword that section.
Yeah, well,
If we keep it.
Yeah, depending on the handbook, yeah. And that would apply to section 5 also.
So that one we need to.
But we're gonna
probably
talk
revisit.
dropping that anyway.
Yeah, just drop it. And then do we need to, you read all
We're
the
gonna have a
other
page and a half.
parts, Rick.
I'm
Or
sorry?
do we need to get any input from the attorney on things that are in contradiction or that are already covered that we might want to address anyway? I'm just throwing, because I don't know. I'm not the attorney that knows what might be in contradiction or not with, like, there's no point in having it in here because it's already covered, like Rick said, under the state.
So that
So,
section 6 for the town depository, he talked about that in the last meeting. That's something that's handled internally already.
Yeah.
Does that really need to be in here? So that would have been one of the things we talked about last time, maybe taking out about the town depository or banks.
because why, I'm sorry, they do choose where they take it. So why is it, because it's already specified somewhere or why, I'm sorry.
So it's written, they may select, the council may select. The
Right.
council, I don't believe, has been selecting the bank. I believe that's been handled internally within employees.
No, the council does select usually because they vote, like if they have $100,000, they'll go up there. So, well, I say I make a motion that we put that $100,000 at this bank because it's this percentage rate or
Mhm.
whatever. So they do select where they do the banking. They have chosen to do it locally or where they're gonna invest
Leave it
it.
alone.
And you can leave it alone because, again, the state does not prohibit that.
Right.
I think Scott's point was if you were going to draft a new charter, it's a redundant thing because obviously the council will pick where our money's going.
Right.
Yeah, we don't want to end up with a blank charter.
That might be really easy. Just get it down to half a page.
Yeah.
Mike could do it with all the
Oh, yeah.
other state.
Just think how much
stuff.
money we're saving the
Yeah.
town.
But I just didn't follow you, Joe. I didn't, because I could get a clue on that. the
Yeah,
last time
that's
you
what he
said
had
it or
touched on
something. I
last
guess I
time.
was-
Yeah.
I daydreamed during that part.
I went back and listened to the last meeting. It's on record and you can go online and hear what we said, so.
Oh, okay, I probably need a refresher.
That's a scary thought.
But they do that. So to me, that does reflect what we actually do. So I don't we have to take it out.
I personally would just, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It truly doesn't. If we rewrite it, we could take it out. Some people might want to know, well, who decides?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it'll show right up front. Again, when he said the state gives the town a lot of authority, they do. They truly do. I don't have a problem with 6 one way or the other. And 7
Yeah,
is,
me
is
too.
pretty standard. And we got into miscellaneous, and there is at least one change under miscellaneous. And we have discussed that actually in a town council meeting. That would be atop of page 5 about calling special meetings upon at least 3 hours written notice. And we discussed the possibility of using email, text.
To make it doesn't have to be written like a
Right.
piece of paper going out.
I wrote down here 3 hours written, verbal, or digital notice. I mean, that if I were to make a change, that's what I'd do.
Written,
But if you left it vague, then the council could determine how they wanted to do it.
Just say 3 hours
notice, just take
Right.
the written
That's
out.
true. So you'd be striking written, and that I agree. Yeah.
Just put 3
Make it
hours
simple.
notice. They can determine.
We're gonna
if
get
they're
down
do
to
it
those
by
2
email,
pages.
Or are we gonna do it by voicemail, or are we gonna do it, how are we gonna do it? Now, going back to section 7, talking about office and office or offices. We just talking about pretty much an officers and employees as may do. Again, do we have offices, officers, or it's all the same as employees?
What page are you on?
Page 4,
Page 4,
powers of the council, section 7.
first 2. Let's have the power to
The council
Well, it-
shall have the power to prescribe the powers and duties of all officers and employees of the town. So officers is reading to be different than employees, but does it really matter? We don't have officers, but does it matter that's in there? Because we could just have them, but we don't. So it just
Yeah,
refers to
I mean,
employees then.
They could appoint
They
a
could
treasurer.
appoint
They
They
could
could,
appoint
yeah.
a general manager or city manager.
Okay, that would be an officer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah, that kind of leaves it open. So if they wanted to, they could and take it away if it didn't work out.
Gotcha. Doesn't say
We
they
don't-
need
we don't
to,
wanna-
just.
Probably
Yeah.
break it down where we have to do just one thing, you know?
No, that makes sense. I was just trying to think, who are they? We don't have them, but that's leaving it open to, we could have them if we ever wanted to. So that's good. I get it.
And other than written notice, that's the only other change.
We're not funded. On Article Section 4, we're just an appointed, we're not funded, are we?
And they made that very clear in the first.
Exactly, yeah.
We're not funded.
But I don't.
This group?
Yeah.
It
So why
says,
does
yeah, I read that and I'm like, well, we're sure not going by that because it says something about funding.
You know, we provide you
Maybe
all the supplies and
Paper.
paper.
Okay.
If there have to be legal notices
look
sent
here,
out,
Sue,
you know,
we
the
were
town
funded.
pays
We
for
got
it.
a notepad.
We got a
and a
notepad.
folder. We have
Couldn't
been
get a
funded.
pen though.
When the attorneys put this, they're getting paid the same, I'm going, what?
Yeah, you and I are used to working under a tight budget.
Well, that's the other thing, because if you have questions, we have to refer to the lawyer who gets $200 an hour. So
Okay,
we're
all right.
holding the attorney.
So the committee is funded.
So we are funded. We aren't funded.
We are, but the
it
committee is funded,
Yeah.
okay.
And our acts are what we need to do.
So the only question I've got, and I'm not on the committee, so you can choose to just ignore me, but under section 7, powers of the council, the only weird wording to me is employees of the town may be required to give such bond as the council may prescribe.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Oh, well, I've been bonded before. That's in case you screw up, you got an insurance company backing you up.
Right, I've never heard a town
If they-
requiring an employee.
If they
to
had to,
provide
they could.
Yeah.
It doesn't say you have to be.
that. Right.
I frankly like it because if somebody decided to just steal a tractor, city tractor and sell it, you know, what do? Yeah, you can send him to jail for 5 years, but who's gonna pay for the tractor we just lost?
Mhm.
I like the idea.
It's not hard to get bonded either.
They bonded me, they bond anybody.
Now, I assume there's expense to bonding, is there?
Well, it's an insurance.
It's like an
it's
insurance.
thing. You know,
But they could require the employee to get that bonding, or does it say the town would pay for it?
normally
or
the company would pay for the bonding.
The town or the
Yeah,
whoever.
in my
this
case, it was a jewelry company I worked for. And, yeah, they paid, I had to do, they did a lie detector test, and that was really all it took on the bonding, was a lie detector test. And it was wrong. It said I lied, I didn't. That's why I don't trust lie detector tests anymore.
They're notoriously inaccurate.
Yeah, this one was.
And they bonded you anyway, huh?
Yeah, they just had to do it. They knew what I was, and I think the guy that did the lie detector test realized, something went haywire. When you got a halo over your head, it's really hard.
I think we've,
So
Well,
if somebody asks you, have you stolen the $10,000, you're going to get a spike in
Well,
emotion.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
And
at least
it was that type of question.
3.5.
He said, "Have you ever stolen anything from Imperial Distributors?" And you get that spike. I told him no, I never had. And it spiked on me.
because your mama had always
That's
told
the-
you how to behave.
That's a control question.
Very much so. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, we've covered most of it except the handbook issues.
So
Except the
we
what?
need to get,
The handbook issue, employee handbook.
probably need to, how big a document is that?
The employee handbook also needs to be addressed by the council because it's a lot of outdated stuff.
Stuff that is.
But I think that was the point, was that if you're going to provide that to your employees as their Bible,
You
then
better be
it can't
right.
conflict with the charter. So it'd probably be easier for the council to amend and update a handbook than it would be to amend and update the charter.
Can
So
we
it
put
is-
that on the agenda?
Or
For them
To
update
amend
it.
for the-
Are they gonna
for
do a
the-
workshop?
That's
we've
up to
done
the-
one workshop on it, but it got derailed. But I've already informed them we need to do another workshop and just highlight everything they need to change because there's just a lot of outdated stuff in it. We don't follow the current vacation procedures the way they're written. We don't follow the sick time as it's written. They don't follow. There's a lot of stuff. But I mean, when an employee gets hired here, and that's traditional in any business, you give them a handbook or a
Right.
manual to follow.
But to be clear, that's not our responsibility.
No, it's not. It's the council's.
But it can hinder what we're trying to do here if they have not updated it.
Yeah, because if we say, like it would, under the guidelines of the employee handbook or whatever we talked about, I think in one section about
Whatever you
referring it
said,
out to
yeah.
that if it's not accurate, then.
Right, but it's easier to update that, I guess is
Right.
my point. So in other
Yeah.
words, if you bake anything into the charter that specifies how employees are compensated or suspended or hired, it will always defer to that. And the only way to ever change that would be to do another charter amendment. So then you gotta go through the process of getting on a ballot and voting for it and hoping it passes, whereas if the council just could do that by employee handbook,
Right.
then they could update it as they see fit
What
as a
was the
council.
comment you gave on that? The way you said,
Yeah. Reiterate that for us.
I just brainstormed,
it was good.
Okay, where was it? We're
on
on
page
Section 2.
4, section 2.
page 4?
Yep,
section
same
2?
additional powers.
Okay.
He made the statement that you could put in establish an employee handbook that may be updated from time to time.
Right, I would say that the town council shall have the authority to,
So-
what word do you want to use?
To produce an
To
update.
produce an employee manual or a personnel handbook.
So what kind of time frame before we have the new revised handbook?
I mean, the way it's written now is the way we have to go by it now.
Right.
But I
That's-
can
my
give that
next
to you
question.
now, I mean, I can print it out.
Because
and have it to you for
all
next
we
meeting,
would do
but-
here is revert back to the handbook,
Correct.
and then you'll update the handbook accordingly.
Right,
Correct.
and they don't have to have that voted on or
Sure.
voted.
And so then in other words, what would happen is if you passed a charter that just said, the town council shall have the authority to establish an employee handbook, that sets salaries and disciplinary actions and maybe updated from time to time or something along that effect, then the charter would defer back to the handbook.
Mhm.
And then there wouldn't be a conflict between.
But you could also leave that out
You could.
because they're gonna do the handbook anyway.
Yeah.
We don't have to tell them to do the handbook.
Right. But it may be nice to put that in there so that people know that that's how the council is supposed to be handling that, It kind of gives the council instruction on.
Maybe
hey,
they'll get on the
maybe
stick
there's
and
not
do
a
it.
free-for-all, maybe we have a handbook, Because if you take it out, then.
It could
Then
be
they'll
whatever.
It'd just be a
keep on
service.
doing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too much, because they can revise that, and you're not really locking them into specific policies.
And that's easy
or
to
anything.
revise.
You're just saying,
And I'll be honest with you,
have
the
that.
handbook is another one that, like, the charter is very bloated. I think there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be in there. Like, for instance, there's a whole ton of stuff, and there's like sexual harassment stuff. Well, that is law now. I mean, that's
You
state.
don't have to put that.
I don't know that we have to put 20 pages in there about,
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of that stuff that I think, since they wrote it, it's just default.
And if you take it out, they'll be more likely to read it. Get it down to,
Because
people
something reasonable.
do not read.
They don't read parent handbooks either.
No, I
But
know.
And it's not even that long.
What I've got to do is I've got to
Really?
get the council to really sit down and focus. Like, I felt bad because Lenny came in and, Lenny, she had hers all highlighted. She was like, okay, on page 1, paragraph 2, well then, we started talking about public works and mowing, and then we had a 2-hour workshop about who's gonna mow this and who's responsible for this. And we never
You need
looked at
to
the
be-
handbook after page 1, so I gotta get them focused on that.
Then, Ken, when it comes to the handbook, okay, what I'm about to say, I'm not referencing a handbook at all. But what I am proposing is that we have several sections here that I'll say generally have agreed to drop. And can you produce another charter with those dropped out of it?
Yeah.
And then we still have to work out the handbook issue, because I've got so many notes on this now.
So what I'll do is I'll do it the way that our attorney does ordinances and stuff. I'll strike through anything that you want to drop. So you'll still see it. It'll just be struck through.
Okay.
And then any changes that we make, they'll be highlighted. So you can kind of go through it and see what's changed where.
Rather than it just totally disappears.
Yeah.
We don't want it to disappear in case you ever have to refer back to it.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
That would allow us to concentrate on what we're going to do with the employee handbook, the wording there.
And so also, if you strike through things, sometimes you maybe only want to take out part of the sentence, like where we were talking about notifying someone for a special meeting.
Just take
You
out
might just
one
want to
word.
take out that one word, and so
Right.
you just strike through that.
Right.
Like Max did on here.
So you've got their thing.
Yeah.
Who's gonna give them, or do you know which ones, or you'll listen? to
I have the
what we're
recording
dropping
of it, but if
Okay.
you,
I have one that I wrote everything down if you want it.
As far as what we wanna drop.
Yeah,
do we need to do that? And I probably shouldn't be asking this because I should probably know this, but do we need to do that by vote? Someone need to make a motion to say we're dropping paragraph this and this, and then you guys vote on it?
I don't know, or do we just need to vote when we get to our final product? And say,
Well-
here's what we got.
It's not really being dropped.
It's not being
Yeah,
dropped
we
at
we
this
just
point.
want to see what it looks like struck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
You want
let's
this
just do
one
what
with
you're
all the
talking about.
markings?
We're just lining it.
Give that over
Yeah.
to him. It's got all the markings.
Because we
on
can
it.
always say, never mind.
I got an
We're
extra
not,
copy.
like, this isn't what we're presenting at this point to
And
council or
then we
anything.
can vote on it. and-
It's
Right.
rough, but you can pretty well see what,
Well, between this and the recording.
because I know when you
So
listen.
what I'll do is I'll go through this tomorrow, and then I'll email all of you a new draft, and I'll also email you guys a handbook if you want to read the way it's written out. Just so you have it.
Will you send that to us in email form, Ryan?
Yeah.
That'd be great. I think we're moving in the right direction. I really see it simpler.
The fun part's adding stuff. I mean, it's kind of like renovating a house, right? It's easy to do the demolition part of it, but the rebuilding it is the fun part because.
We're not adding anything.
Well, if you look at this one with all these, just giving it a quickie from St. Pete, you're tying their hands and their feet.
Yeah.
Right.
They're gonna throw up their hands and run.
It looks like we're gonna end up having to have the people vote on something anyway.
Yeah.
It should be
It
as
should be
clean
as simple,
and
clean.
small as possible.
Keep in mind that, like you mentioned ordinances earlier, there are a lot of ordinances that give powers that are outside of the charter. So in other words, the emergency management ordinance that we have. Sammy or Gray or whoever was mayor at the time, if there's a hurricane, they are the de facto emergency manager. And that ordinance allows them to unilaterally make purchases, contract with people. So there are ordinances that have powers outside of what the charter allows, but what you have to do is make sure that the charter doesn't conflict with that.
Exactly.
Because it would always defer to the charter. And if anyone ever wanted to, have an issue with that.
So this is our policy and then we have the procedures.
Yes, basically.
So if,
And I think if we get
And they're
this
all
as clean as
online now.
possible,
if we don't add anything, so to speak, we can't conflict with anything if there's no
Right.
conflict here.
Right.
And I guess the thing to keep in mind is ask yourself in your head, do we need to put this in the charter or could the current council set that by ordinance? Because then what that would allow is that would allow the next council to amend or
flexibility.
get rid of that ordinance. So it gives them the flexibility based on what's happening at the time.
And I was gonna say, to keep current with the times. That's what happened in the old one was, it was back in the dark ages and there were things that we just,
I
we
think
haven't been doing
our,
for 30 years.
I think our employee handbook says something about if we need to reach an employee, we have to do it by home phone, work phone, or pager. It tells you how long it's been since we looked at the employee.
Well, it's just like that paragraph in there says when you notify somebody about the special meeting at their residence or,
Right.
yeah.
You
So,
gotta
I
find
mean,
them at their
some of that we
houses.
need to strike out of there.
Right.
And I know they always did try to make sure they got a hold of everyone. They didn't just send an email.
Yeah.
Because somebody could they tried to actually get in
Usually,
touch with
yeah,
that
if we have a
person.
special meeting, we usually either text or call.
Try to
because
make
it's
sure
the
you make
easiest way,
contact.
yeah.
It's not
Didn't
just
they
like, oh, I'm
used to
sorry.
haul
you missed
letters
it.
around and hand to them?
Yeah.
Didn't they used
Yeah.
to?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
used to
that-
deliver a written notice. at
Yeah,
their house.
that's why striking written
Yeah.
in that one paragraph can change all that for us.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Right.
Well,
Second.
we gotta set a time and a date for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I will say, I don't, I'm going next week, the latter half of next week, so if y'all set it there, then you could probably get something done.
No. I think every couple weeks is fine to me. It gives you time to
Yeah, we're
plug it
moving
out.
along with it pretty good. it
Is
looks
this
like.
time
I
good
think-
for everybody? Is 5:30 a good time?
So far.
So
I think
far.
It'd be the
it's
toughest on Jeremy.
It doesn't matter, y'all don't mind me coming up here dirty in my work clothes, it doesn't matter to me.
Same with me. I've got dish soap all over in front of me, so.
5:30 is good.
And that gives Ryan
So what day do you
time
wanna do?
to
What
get
days?
this together for us. I
Wanna
think
try-
Thursday.
If you wanna do it every other week,
I think so.
Yeah.
What
2
time?
weeks would be
The 29th?
that'll give us time to look things
Well,
over.
keep in mind, there's a workshop at 5:30 on the 29th. That airport workshop is 29th. So do you want to bump it to the next week?
You tell me what's on your calendar and we'll,
Yeah,
I mean,
probably
we
should.
can
We
all
don't
work
usually
it.
have anything on Thursdays, but there is a workshop that day.
Okay.
So if you want to keep it on Thursday, the next one would be June 5th. That'd give you 3 weeks.
That's fine.
And that'll give me time to get the revisions done, email it, and everyone can review it.
Just
Now, I
confirm
read-
that date
sorry.
with us with the email.
so you said June 5th?
June 5th at
That's
5:30.
3 weeks from today.
Mhm.
Is that
What
good?
is our time frame? I remember reading it, or the attorney gave us the thing.
16
that we're
months or
trying to
something?
accomplish
Yeah.
this.
I think it was 16 months.
16 or 18
It's
prior.
18 months
Prior
prior to the
to-
election.
yeah. So-
And you have to have all of your revisions to the supervisor of elections, I think, by like March of next year.
Oh,
So I
so
mean,
we're
we're in
got-
pretty good shape.
We're in good shape.
Okay.
We're about done now.
Okay. All right, I
Real
just want to
quick.
make sure we had plenty of time to do that, and that sounds good, because I got company at my house for dinner at 6:30.
Meeting is adjourned.
Adjourned.